Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our session on developing a tribal air program. My name is Willard, and first some introductions. I've been with the GAP program for about 16 years, and before that, I was with the Air Division. So I'm a GAP project officer, and I've also worked very closely with our Air Division and the other GAP project officer in trying to understand how GAP can support air program activities. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I'm Sally Manning with the Big Pine Paiute tribe, and I'll be doing a case study on how to develop an air program using GAP. And I'm trying to figure out the screen sharing, and it's going to the second slide. I'm not sure. There we go. Okay. So are we ready?
First, first on housekeeping. Most of our tribes, have a EPA Tribal Environmental Plan, a strategic plan known as the EPA. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Our headquarters office in Washington, D.C. would like us to provide training on all these EPA priorities. Again, the EPA, pesticides, emergency response, all the EPA programs under GAP in the other medias. Yeah. This session is counting as an EPA training. So for all our participants, if you have not done so, we're asking you to identify yourself, your name, and your tribal affiliation in the chat box. So that way we can identify who's participating in this session that we're counting as part of your ETEP training. Yeah. So the purpose of this session is to kind of give you an overview of what GAP can do to support the development of your air quality program, how tribes can develop a program to look at air quality, to get training, to do outreach, to educate your community, and everything that really I would like to categorize as planning. Yeah, to start to think strategically what would go into your air program, and each tribe is very different. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sally, and she's going to basically talk about GAP, but also how she was able first to use GAP as a foundation to build her air program, then transition into an air program that's funded by Clean Air Act grant funding. So you will get a real good case study. And then we're going to pivot back, and I'm going to mention two other programs that is covered by GAP, which is the indoor program, indoor air quality program, as well as the climate change program. So that's what we were planning to do. So and please go ahead and type in your question in the chat box. If there's Jeanette, if there's something that's really burning, that's something that is very confusing to a particular person, maybe you can interrupt me. I know that sometimes it's better to go through the presentation, but if in fact there's something that is very confusing, just let me know, and then maybe we can pause and help clarify. So maybe we can pause for clarification if necessary, but we will answer your questions probably at the end of the presentation if necessary. First of all, what can GAP do for you? You may be familiar with the GAP guidance. All the material that I'll be presented is in the National GAP guidance that's dated 2013, and there's a section in the appendix with all the indicators. So that information is there. Obviously, you should have a PDF, or you will have access to the PDF version of this PowerPoint. You should also have a handout in PDF that basically is kind of like my talking points for this presentation. It's a one-page handout that talks about air activities under GAP. So those are resources that you can refer to as I go through this presentation. So, and we're Again, GAP will help you to answer your question. What are the air quality challenges is facing my reservation, and what are the impacts on my community? As you start to answer that question, I had alluded to the EPA Tribal Environmental Plan, the ETEP. Again, all of our tribes have developed this strategic plan. So this ETEP may already have done the analysis for you. However, most of the ETEPs are very broad and may only have a general goal statement that in the next 5 years, the tribe will develop an air pollution control program, which is fine. Some ETEPs are like that. So if in fact you don't have any detail in your ETEP, then you could use GAP to kind of flesh out your program. First, of course, is to kind of get some training, whether it be ETEP, I should say the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, or other activities. Again, I alluded to the GAP supporting planning activities. Implementation is to, the day-to-day operation of a particular program. I think Sally's going to talk about having a monitoring program that what is defined as implementation. When you set up a monitoring network, you're basically collecting air quality data on a permanent basis. And then you're going to have to get those samples and send it to the lab. That's what we call implementation. GAP is really focused on planning and kind of ask the question, do you even need a monitoring system? How dirty your area is? So that's a type of a question you'll be asking, and GAP can allow you to do the research. Yeah. Okay. Next. As I alluded to, training. So if in fact you're new to the GAP program and new to the topic of air pollution control, there are different sources, and the first link reference the National Tribal Air Association, and they have a section for new airheads. It's pretty cool. So when you have time, look at it. And then there's also the Institute of Tribal Environmental Professional, based in Northern Arizona. They also have a list of classes. EPA also may have webinars or virtual type training. And again, hopefully you'll be getting our tribal newsletter that we will be advertising our future training. So please look at that. The second bullet talks about the air program needs assessment, which is basically what I am describing as your research project on what your air pollution problem is, what you think is the cause of it, and potential strategies. Yeah. And one of the things that we want you to do is look at existing data. In California, Nevada, Arizona, even though you may not have an air quality program, the state and the regional air districts and the county may have an air pollution control program and an existing monitoring network. You also may have tribes in a nearby, near your reservation, also have a network of monitors which you can look at their data.
Oh no, Willard, you're muted. Willard?
Okay, unmute myself. Thank you. Yeah. For some reason, both my screen went blank when okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. In terms of trying to take advantage of the resources already there, so you look at a air district in your air basin that have net monitoring data, or a nearby tribe. Again, we're talking about regional data. Now, of course, in the course of your research, you may find out, despite this network of air monitors, your location, your reservation is not adequately covered, but you won't know that until you ask the question: where are the monitoring data? And we're talking about, the criteria: air pollution, carbon monoxide, PM10, and ozone. Those are what we're focusing on in terms of ambient air quality impacts. The other or final bullet is develop an emissions inventory. That's to capture or to describe what sources of air pollution is coming from your reservation. It may be businesses or industry or maybe automobile. You may have a very, very busy gasoline station or a truck stop with a lot of diesel trucks, for example. Or you may have a lot of homes with wood-burning stoves, or there's a lot of construction going on and there may be particulate emissions, or maybe you have a lot of unpaved roads. So that's again, to identify what homegrown or pollution, air quality impacts that is coming from your own reservation. Next. As you continue on your research, there may be something that jumps off at you that may need immediate attention. Again, I'm just using some hypothetical examples that if you feel that certain people are still burning their garbage, or if in fact you have your tribal reservations have a lot of farming activities, or there's prescribed burning and you may want to regulate that, you may want to do or consider developing an ordinance that addresses those concerns. And if you have a lot of construction activities that result in a lot of particulate matter, or dust and dirt that kicks up, you may want a regulation to address those type of facilities. So those are the type of things. Again, wood burning stoves are another thing that you can maybe encourage homes with older, dirtier wood burning stoves to consider buying new ones. Again, that's just something for you to look at, depending on what you find in your emissions inventory or what the community tells you in terms of feedback as you begin to understand your air pollution problem. Participate in regional initiatives. Again, the air basin can be very large. The tribes may be impacted from pollution from a metropolitan area, and a large air district may have stakeholder groups that you can participate in. So keep an eye out for that. Community outreach and education. Again, GAP for all our media program has an opportunity for you to educate people if in fact people are still burning material or their garbage or something for whatever reason. You can tell them not to do it in terms of their outreach. So maybe rather than passing an ordinance, maybe in an educational outreach type of approach, it's another strategy. So things like that, and of course, and then in education, if you want to develop material for K through 12, if there's a population of youth, by all means, that's also a possibility. Next. Okay. So this is just a nice graphic in terms of the foundation that GAP lays out in terms of building the first steps of an air quality program. And the last two bullets, or I should say draft monitoring plan and then the Clean Air Act 103 proposal, I think for these last two steps, it's that's when, based on your assessment in the previous steps, if you feel that there's a serious air pollution problem, and before you even contemplate a draft monitoring plan, you should talk to your GAP project officer, because if you're serious about drafting a monitoring plan, that monitoring plan is fine under GAP, meaning it's a plan, you could draft it. But in order to implement it, you eventually will have to be considered for a Clean Air Act funding under the 103 program. I do want to acknowledge that the Clean Air Act funding is not guaranteed. There's limited level of funding. So you should talk to us, and also we will also maybe pull in our colleagues from the Air Pollution Control Program and that particular grant program to kind of give you, how they can maybe talk to you about drafting a potential proposal. But in the latter stages, if you feel that you're thinking about applying for any clean air type funding, please talk to your GAP project officer, and he or she will probably request that there be a conference call with our air pollution colleagues, in the clean air program.
Hey, Willard.
So I think this is now my transition. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Does someone have a question?
This is Roberto Gutierrez. I'm a project officer in the Air and Radiation Division.
Yes.
So I just wanted to mention that, we don't really call it the Air Pollution Control Division or Office. We're the Grants and Program Integration Office. So, yeah, we're happy to speak to anybody who is done work under GAP and wants to maybe see what the next steps are.
Exactly. Yeah. And we work very closely that we would pull in our colleagues if, in fact, you're contemplating it. But we really want us to have that discussion first. And the key is to go through the initial GAP steps. Roberto and other Air Division folks, anything you want to add before I hand it over to Sally? Or?
No, I think.
Yes.
I think you covered a lot of things. Like I said, it's a partnership. We always encourage people to accomplish as much as they can under GAP because there is more funding there. And when it comes to collecting environmental data, yeah, definitely come talk to us and talk to Audrey Johnson as well in our QA office so that we get the right information and we get everybody on the right step to make it a successful endeavor. And Sally's one of my grantees and they do a wonderful job. So I'm happy to hear what she has to say.
Hi, Roberto. Yeah, I can go from here. I think, again, Willard approached me to give a case study on a tribe that used GAP to develop an air program. And again, I'm Sally Manning. As it says, I'm the environmental director at the Big Pine Paiute tribe of the Owens Valley. And when I started with the tribe in 2009, some things had already begun using GAP funding. I also heard loud and clear from the tribal chairperson that the tribe wanted to pursue air pollution monitoring and funding. So this slide gives an idea of where Owens Valley is located. It's in California, but it's east of the Sierra Nevada. Owens Valley lies at the western edge of the Great Basin region of the United States. There is no drainage of water to the sea. In fact, there's no drainage of water out of Owens Valley. The only way for water to leave Owens Valley is through evaporation. So the climate is arid. Our average annual precipitation is about 5 inches, and a little bit east of us is Death Valley, which is one of the driest places, of course, in the world, where the average annual precipitation is only 2 inches a year. So Owens Valley qualifies as a desert. This is relevant to the tribe's desire for an air program, but it's not the only reason why we're interested. If your tribe has an interest in developing an air monitoring program, I think you should make sure you can answer the question, why? And we spent a lot of time on this using GAP funding. So we did assess concerns about air among the community members on the reservation. We evaluated regional concerns, looked at air pollution sources, looked at emissions off of the reservation in particular and whether they may be affecting the reservation air. We're talking about ambient air. And then if you do decide that this is a direction you're going to be going, you probably want to address this in your ETEP. We didn't have ETEPs when I started here, but the priority was to look into an air program. And these steps can be concurrent, ongoing. they're not necessarily in any particular order. We knew we had some reasons for looking at air quality. We knew of the potential for harmful particulate matter, PM10, coming from Owens Lake. All around the valley, there's groundwater pumping by the city of Los Angeles, the LA DWP. I sometimes just call them DWP. And there's other activities on the land besides the pumping that could result in soil erosion and thus dust. Also, people observed and voiced concerns over residential burning, both outdoor burning of weeds and things, but also indoor heating in the winter. A lot of wood burning occurs. And if you come into Big Pine in the morning, as I do driving to work, you do see a smoke layer over the valley, right over Big Pine. So it's very noticeable to other people in the area. Then, of course, smoke from wildfires. This was a concern. It's become a real concern in more recent times as everyone in California and probably elsewhere is dealing with that. Okay, this is a cartoon, kind of a diagram to simplify our setting, and it's an attempt to present the tribe's concerns. Okay, here we see the Owens Valley watershed, and water flows from mostly the Sierra Nevada mountains, from the mountains down into the long, narrow Owens Valley. The water flows to Owens River, and the river's terminus naturally was Owens Lake. And remember, the only outlet from Owens Lake was through evaporation. Prior to DWP and white people coming, the Paiute people diverted the creeks and spread it to irrigate the lands. They grew food, fiber, medicinal plants, and they created animal habitat by doing this. When the white settlers arrived, they took over and to some extent altered the Indian ditches. But the green lines are shown here as an attempt to show that there was water spread over the valley floor for many, many thousands of years. And that's something that has changed. So along came the city of Los Angeles. They built their LA Aqueduct, shown here in pink. And what it did, it diverted the entire contents, the entire flow of the Owens River, leaving the lower part of the Owens River dry and leaving Owens Lake to dry up. Owens Lake was deprived of water and went dry in about the 1920s. And becoming dry in this rather sudden, unnatural way is one reason why the 110 square mile lake bed of Owens Lake became one of the largest emitters of particulate matter in the United States. For DWP, just taking all of the valley's surface water and the lake water wasn't enough. They installed groundwater pumps throughout the valley, and they pumped to help fill their aqueduct. Heavy pumping has been going on in earnest since about 1970, and it has killed off groundwater-dependent meadows in the valley, leaving them vulnerable to soil erosion and thus dust when the wind blows. And I also want to point out, by using this cartoon, that it's really hard to put Owens Valley, actual view of Owens Valley on a PowerPoint because it's so long and narrow. So I wanted to point out some of the distances. From Bishop to Lone Pine is 60 miles. And from Big Pine, where we are, to the north side of Owens Lake is 46 miles as the crow flies. Owens Lake itself is about 16 miles north to south and 10 miles wide west to east. There is air monitoring by our Regional Air Pollution Control Board called the Great Basin Unified Air Pollution Control District. And they have monitoring up in Bishop, and they have lots of monitoring around Owens Lake. But there's also the potential for dust generating land surface activities in between, such as the groundwater pumping, agriculture, livestock grazing, and recreation, off-road vehicles, for example. Just looking out the back door of our building, you know, this is sometimes what we're seeing when we should be seeing Black Mountain right over there. And so we knew we had a problem. These photos were taken in about the year 2012. At that time, LA DWP had begun dust control measures at Owens Lake, and they were proving to be effective. So even though the dust is being controlled at the lake, we're still seeing dust coming from the valley floor. So we felt that we wanted to continue to pursue an air program. We persevered, and we became informed and involved with the regional issues. We attend meetings, or we at least monitor their agendas. And the tribe did get a seat at the table in meetings to discuss concerns with Owens Lake. We acquired some equipment for pilot studies. And in fact, prior to my arrival here, the tribe had acquired a meteorological station with instruments. And we also prepared a quality assurance plan for collecting that weather data. The environmental staff, especially me, we needed some training. So we did take advantage of the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals. They have excellent courses, and they provide scholarships should you need financial assistance to attend. And I learned right off, as I probably knew already, that air is really fascinating, but it's also pretty complicated. There's always more to learn, but it really is important. And we all know now, especially with the smoke, how important it is to human health, and probably the smoke has shortened more life than we want to think about. The tribe did prepare an emissions inventory. We're actually working on our third one now. GAP did cover the expenses for doing that. We did find with the emissions inventory that residential wood burning and other burning, traffic along the highway that bisects the reservation, and the potential for windborne particulate matter were all identified as emissions to be concerned about. And we did outreach. Like Willard mentioned, we talked about the importance of clean air. We talked about various issues going on with air pollution, and we tried to target different audiences like youth at the education center, and tribal leaders and elders when we could, in various forms. We prepared a needs assessment, a written needs assessment that laid out our concerns. And now you're probably thinking, this is a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. So we used GAP to hire an environmental technician, and we got a very motivated young woman who was able to focus a lot of her time on these air issues, because me trying to do everything in GAP, just about everything, can be distracting. We also took advantage of interns. ITEP has a summer air internship program, and we applied for interns. We've had a series of about 3 of them, and they've been excellent students, excellent workers. And that 8 weeks that they're here goes by really fast. It's also important to be in contact, of course, with your GAP project officer regarding your needs and regarding your progress. By 2014 or so, we were ready for some pilot studies, which is allowable under GAP if you get permission. And our environmental technician recommended that we purchase a portable air pollution monitoring device called an EBAM, an environmental data attenuation monitor. And this was going to be able to help us gather some data on the reservation on particulate matter in the air. Here's a picture of the EBAM. A couple of environmental staff people set it up in the parking lot late one afternoon as the tribal council was arriving for a meeting, and we basically didn't let them go in the door. We had them come over and take a look at the EBAM, and it was a good opportunity for them to see it and ask questions and know that we were moving forward with what their priorities were. We did do the needs assessment and using GAP, and guess what? It pointed to a gap in air monitoring in Owens Valley. There is a gap in the narrow part of the Owens Valley where Big Pine is located. And I show this picture, which I can't see all of it in my screen, but this is a view, this photo is captured from the Great Basin Air District's webcam, and we're looking northwest from the Inyo Mountains across to the Sierra, across Owens Valley. In this view, Owens Lake is to the left, where there isn't any dust that you can see in the picture, but Big Pine is far over to the right side. And even on a clear day, you can just barely see Big Pine from this webcam, and it's the only one of their webcams that even has Big Pine at all. I also got this corroboration, which helped justify our air program. I attended a lecture given by a well-known geologist who studies our area, and he's also a pilot, or he was, and he used, he would fly around in his plane to look at geology of interest. Turns out he was also observing dust and changes in dust from the valley. When he visited the Owens Valley in April of one year, there were wind gusts exceeding 40 miles per hour. And at first he assumed it was just coming from Owens Lake, like everybody used to assume. But then he noticed that it was coming from the valley floor, north of the lake, not the lake itself. He said that this was a surprising change from how conditions were in the valley when he wrote his book, which was prior to the dust measures being implemented by DWP at Owens Lake. So what he was observing is now common in the valley, that dust emissions from mismanaged lands on the valley floor. And despite this change in trend, the Great Basin Unified Air Pollution Control District, our regional air district, they don't monitor in the Big Pine area. The nearest one is 15 miles to north in Bishop, sorry. So by this time, the tribe was submitting proposals to EPA in hopes of acquiring some air funding. And we were awarded funding for fiscal year 17. So in late 2016, the tribe used the new funding to hire an air program coordinator. I'm happy to say that we've been successful in keeping our tribal air program going with the funding from EPA. And also, once you have a person in place, you can look for funding from other sources. EPA and GAP project officers realize that although tribal air funding is great to have, running a program, it can be time consuming and expensive. And so there's still capacity building things that you could do. Can't believe that. For example, GAP, we do continue to put some capacity building things in GAP to support the air program. They're kind of limited, but you can talk to your project officer about what those might be. So now I turn it back to Willard.
Thank you, Sally. I saw in the chat box that I was breaking up. My VPN, which is our security measure, has been off all this time. Hopefully, the audio will come through, but please, I can follow up with other questions during the Q&A. So, next slide. I'm going to touch upon two other air programs that's covered by the GAP program. Again, some of our tribes may not be able to do much of some of the ambient air quality, whether it be transport from another metropolitan area or automobile pollution nearby or going through your reservation. But most of us spend the majority of our time indoors. So the GAP does want to help tribe address potential, indoor air quality concerns. Again, the first step is for you to take training, whether it be ITEP or maybe EPA-owned related type of training. Healthy homes type training is a very well-known type of training activity. Indoor air quality assessment, same type of approach as the air quality assessment. Again, trying to understand what are the sources or concern in your residential population, in your homes on the reservation. Again, some of the things that we try to look at, moisture, and radon. We do also work closely with our air and radiation division in terms of the radon. If you think you want to investigate that, unlike the outdoor air, there's no standard per se of indoor air criteria pollutant. We do know that a lot of the concerns are in residential areas that people or may have been told by their residents or by the housing department that needs to be investigated. So that's the type of outreach investigation that you may want to initiate. Again, by taking the training, you will have a better understanding what is a methodological approach to look at a residential unit for these type of indoor air concerns. Again, I had mentioned earlier about wood burning stoves, so that's just something that you guys may want to look at. Again, we also have experts in the air program that we would like to hook you up if a wood burning stove is a concern. Again, we're trying to address homes with some of the more dirtier and older wood burning stoves that may need to be replaced. Yeah. And one of the last things that you may want to consider if in fact you initiate your analysis, the GAP guidance does offer an opportunity to develop a program to address indoor air quality improvements as part of your building renovation program. That last bullet is language specifically from our GAP guidance as a potential activity. So it's something that you may want to contemplate working with your housing department to think about having a program, designing a program with your housing department, moving forward for future housing construction or rehabilitation. Again, Banos is one of our indoor air person, and if you're ready to consider such a program, your GAP project officer would be more than happy to connect you with our air division colleague. Next. The other program that's covered under GAP is climate change. And there are two parts to our climate change planning. The first is the vulnerability and risk assessment. That's an analysis that identifies what are the vulnerabilities on the reservation, whether it be to your infrastructure, to your natural resources, or to human health. So, it could be, again, sea level rise, it could be wildfires, it could be flooding, it could be the loss of electricity because of utility shutdown. So you will do a comprehensive reservation-wide assessment. What are these vulnerabilities are? Yeah. And then the climate change preparedness or adaptation program or plan is basically based on your vulnerability assessment. How will you plan to address each of these vulnerabilities through specific strategies? For example, if in fact your vulnerability assessment identifies a fire danger, you may want to, as part of an adaptation measure in your adaptation plan, look at some sort of defensive space planning. You could do a GPS on your vegetation and also develop a field management program. Again, this is all planning analysis. This can give you the basis, for example, using the field reduction example. Once you identify the problem, you may have to go either to BIA or FEMA for funding to actually do vegetation management or field reduction to pay for that, because that's considered implementation. But the actual adaptation planning to actually document and flush out what this strategy is can be paid for by GAP. Again, GAP is all about supporting sustainability and reducing your carbon footprint. So the third star is about the Energy Star program. Again, whether it be buying equipment or vehicles, or even developing buildings that are more energy efficient, or what we call green building codes to make your building more energy efficient. Again, we also encourage tribes to participate in regional, climate change discussion. Again, we want you to be stakeholders at the table to talk to, the metropolitan or the regional air agency, the state agencies such as the California Air Resources Board, as there would be numerous opportunities to participate and also participate in the training in terms of, climate change planning and stakeholder engagement. Next. again, unfortunately, our new normal is this constant impact from wildfire, and we're now in these extended wildfire seasons. And while the federal air pollution control program, it's about pollution control, we do want to acknowledge that GAP and I guess the federal government in general wants to prepare our tribes in terms of coping with the new realities of wildfire. And Air Division and others have put together some great links or resources. Next. And this is just a screenshot of that website that you will see, and but there are, of course, other state and local websites. You may want to go to what the state has to offer. This is what you can find at the EPA website in the previous link that I show you. So this is an ongoing concern. Please talk to your project officer in terms of how we can support you in terms of these wildfire impacts, because you could be in an entertainment area that's relatively clean, but if in fact these wildfires do happen, that your community or your reservation would be impacted by smoke. So we want to at least help you develop a program or look at not just EPA, but other federal resources that can help you, whether it be FEMA or BIA or either the state or local government. So next. So as I'm about to wrap up, I just want to encourage the grantees who are our partners to think about developing their air pollution program, under GAP. But please think about, look at your ETEP, if in fact that analysis may already have taken place, and look at the GAP guidance and the one-page handout, which is basically, a lot of my talking points is from that one-page handout. Please look at that. And I noticed that if I was, if I was breaking up in the audio for if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, but also contact your GAP project officer, because they are also very knowledgeable about potential air pollution control activities that you may want to consider. In the next few months, your GAP project officer will be calling you to engage and to brainstorm with you on what you want to do for fiscal year 22. That work plan and budget will be due in January, and you may want to contemplate some air management activities, some of the planning stuff that GAP has mentioned, in the early stages. But of course, if you're one of the few that have done most of these activities I mentioned, and if you're ready for either doing a monitoring plan or even contemplating applying for an air grant, please talk to your project officer first, and we would like them to talk to our Air Division colleague to see if in fact you are ready to apply for the upcoming cycle. But first talk to your GAP project officer. But again, between November and December, my colleagues, all the GAP project officers will be reaching out to begin the fiscal year 22 cycle, and hopefully you will use some of this very valuable information. Again, my contact information, if in fact the audio was not clear, I apologize. Please feel free to call me or talk to me or talk to your GAP project officer, and I can maybe help explain further certain parts, or maybe you can ask questions now. Sally, do you have any thoughts before we turn over to Q&A? Or
I'm going to take it off the sharing. No, I think we have a few more minutes if we want to have questions.
And thank you everybody for all the, go ahead.
Oh, I haven't seen any questions in the chat box, but please let me know if I missed anything. Anyone in the audience?
And thanks everybody. Yeah, I saw some good resources about the TAM Center. Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you. Was that Frank who identified that? Appreciate that. So yeah, but ITEP is your go-to. And Roberto, feel free to chime in if any of your other Air Division colleagues on in terms of how you can help and stuff. But again, there are a lot of different programs besides ambient air that we can help you begin a air program, whether it be indoor air and climate change.
Yeah, thanks, Willard. Some of the things that I think you mentioned and that Sally covered is, you want to have an idea of what it is, what's the universe that you want to investigate, or what information you're trying to achieve with your program. And so that is a really good first step to really understand what's going on. I think there are some times that people say, oh, this highway, I know that the pollution is coming from there. But in the process of looking into different things, they notice that there's more to it. There are the wood stoves, or maybe there's a source nearby. And the other thing I would say is that not all air basins are created equally. So you can be located close to an air district and maybe not have representative air, or maybe you do, and the closest monitor is kind of matching up what you guys see. So really just kind of getting an idea of what a monitoring program does. And I think the only kind of, I mentioned earlier when you kept referring to us as air pollution control, monitoring does not control pollution, and neither do we with our grants, but it gives you information that you can go to your local air district, or information that you can come to us at EPA and talk to us about the air quality in your area. So it's a first step.
Yeah, and hopefully your regional or local air pollution control district is available and helpful by sharing their environmental air quality monitoring data. If there are problems, please contact us, and maybe we can contact Air Division, because we can maybe help provide access or make that connection too. But we're hoping there's a spirit of collaboration between and information sharing between the regional air pollution control agency that's collecting, monitoring data, in your air basin, and their willingness to share. But if in fact there's you're not sure who to ask and stuff, let me know. But hopefully there's an open door or a spirit of collaboration. Okay. Any final questions? I think we're ready to wrap up. Again, you have my email. There's a PDF version of this presentation. There's a one-page handout too. Feel free to email me or of course your GAP project officer. And once we're ready to have what we call our grantee calls to prepare them fiscal year 22, I'd be more than happy to sit in with your GAP project officer as well. So but your GAP project officer would be more than capable of handling brainstorming with you if you want to contemplate air gap activities. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Sally, any final words?
Yeah, maybe a little bit about elaborating on what Roberto was saying, that there are air districts throughout the state, throughout the country, I assume, and your tribe may not really be covered by the monitoring that they're doing. And I think it's one thing I just think is so cool about working for the tribes is by being where we are located in little pins throughout the Region 9, we're able to look at air concerns that might be missed otherwise. Plus we have people here who are affected by that air quality. And the air pollution control districts, you know, they monitor based on whether there's a population of people who are affected by the PM, the particulate matter, or whatever the air pollutant might be. So, you know, if I had my way, all tribes would have an air program, because I think it's just really valuable to look at it at that big a scale. So I encourage you, if you're interested, or if you think there's a need at all, to continue working on it. I think we're...
So it looks like, yeah, that'll be wrapping it up. I don't see any last minute questions in the chat. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Video. Yeah.